Hello and welcome back to Why You're Wrong, the show where we put some of football's biggest narratives under the microscope to separate fact from fiction and find out what you might be missing. The whole idea of this show was that in the endless churn of opinions around football, real accountability and scrutiny sometimes go missing. We've been doing this for a while now, so this week we're checking in on some of the topics we've covered previously to see if we got it right or if the narrative did. Let's start with the Hammers. Back at the beginning of February, we examined West Ham, then considering sacking David Moyes, a question which is still very much in play at the time of writing. Back then, the Hammers were 16th, a point above relegation, had 1 win, 1 draw and 6 losses in their preceding 8 league fixtures, and had fans lamenting missing out on Sean Dyche, who had just taken the Everton job. It was dire stuff. But our angle was that by the underlying numbers, West Ham actually looked like the 9th best team in the division, with an XG difference of around +4 instead of their real -8, meaning that it was reasonable to expect a rebound. Now, it might not look like a spectacular change of fortune, but since then, the Irons have been markedly better. In their 11 league games, they've taken 16 points. That's a rate which would yield 55 over a full year, good for 8th last season, 1 point below the tally they got then. And they have a goal difference of 0, not bad given that this recent run has included games against Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, Brighton and 2 face-offs with Newcastle. In those 11 matches, Bowen has more than doubled his tally of goals and assists for the whole year, as has Saeed Benrahma, and the defence has been better than it would appear too, with 13 teams conceding fewer goals, but only 7 allowing less XG. Now 5 places and 6 points above the drop zone, West Ham's odds of getting demoted have dropped to under 1% in 538's prediction model. Is it perfect? No. Should Moyes keep his job? Maybe not. But are they likely to play top flight football again next year? Yes. Send us your thoughts on who could take the reins in the comments. Jumping forward to the 10th of March now, and we have Dusan Vlahovic, who I highlighted as a bad fit for the potential striker slots open at PSG, United and Chelsea, amid endless press rumours of an exit from Turin. It might not have been the most amazing insight. The Serb was then on a run of 4 games without a goal involvement in Serie A, but since we discussed him, that run has stretched to 10, despite Juve rising up to 3rd in the Italian table after the return of their deducted points. My claim was that Vlahovic's so-called form struggles were actually a mirage, and that he'd simply stopped finishing at a ridiculous clip, coming back to the rate predicted by his 0.5 XG per 90 minutes. And since we covered him, his XG per 90 has been 0.5, though he's taking slightly more shots, 3.4 up from 3, while chances created have gone back to the level they were at last campaign, reinforcing my argument that he is what he is, a good, not great, forward. In his defence, this has been a cold streak for the big attacker. You'd expect him to have roughly 3 goal involvements since our video, which would perhaps make the thrust of that piece look slightly less prescient. But with his touches in the box and progressive passes received exactly where they were back then, there's little evidence a radical change in luck is on the horizon, despite continued links with mega money moves. It feels like we're going to have to keep tapping the sign. Next up is a trip to Liverpool to check in on my defence of Trent Alexander-Arnold and Darwin Nunez. Trent first, and to quickly recap, my basic read on the right back was more or less the same as Jamie Carragher's. The more he defends, the worse he looks. So when Liverpool are better, he'll be better too. I blamed the midfield and front line more for the issues than Jamie, but that's the long and short of it, and the evidence since seems to back this view up. Against Leeds, Trent had a much freer role, as you can see from his who scored heat map, and while Leeds are not the most challenging opponents right now, that was made possible by a tremendous pressing performance from the Reds, recording a PPDA of 4.28, one of the lowest recorded this season in the Premier League, and way better than their campaign average PPDA of 9.96. With license to roam, Trent grabbed 1.2 expected assists, 2 actual assists, and led the match with passes into the final third on an insane 14 and progressive passes with 13. But arguably the Arsenal match makes my point even better, with Trent highlighted for criticism in the first half hour as Liverpool were on the back foot, seeing him one-on-one with Martinelli and winning just a single tackle. But once Liverpool got on top, he made 4 tackles and 1 interception in the remaining 2/3 of the game, and led his team in touches and chances created, delivering the assist for the equaliser. I'm not the biggest fan of WhoScored's player rating system, but in the opening 30 minutes they gave TAA a 5.9 out of 10. In the remaining 60, they rated him at 8, that's the highest on the field. Nunez is a tougher call. Since mid-February, when we took aim at the donkey narrative, then still widely spread on social media, he slipped out of the first team, playing just 53% of available minutes, partially due to a shoulder injury. But he still had the best underlying numbers in the squad during that time, on 0.9 xg per 90, some feat with Jota and Gakpo at 0.6 and Salah at 0.8, and he's finished at the predicted rate, grabbing 4 goal involvements in 431 minutes. If he'd done that all year, he'd have 19 goals and assists in the Prem, the same as Rashford, and one behind Martinelli and Ollie Watkins. Jury's still out on if that's possible, but we're tentatively optimistic on this one. Okay, that's enough victory laps, and time to look at a shout I got hideously wrong, which was Graham Potter and his improving performance at Chelsea. Now, it's possible that things would have continued to get better after the Dortmund victory in the Champions League. I doubt Potter was going to shepherd the Blues through their quarter-final with Real, but the 2-0 loss to Aston Villa, which proved the last straw for the coach, actually saw the Blues outshoot Unai Emery's team 27-5 and put up 2.4 xg to the Villains' 0.8. And with Frank Lampard overseeing 4 losses from 4 since he returned to the dugout at Stamford Bridge, it should be fairly clear that the club's failings under Potter were not all down to him. There is clearly something more profoundly wrong with the squad, as I touched on in last week's show. But between our piece on Potter at the end of February and his departure from West London on April Fool's Day, Chelsea was still not anywhere near the standard even the most patient fan would expect, or even near the standard Potter got out of Brighton. They played 5, scored 6, and picked up 7 points, with only 7 teams netting fewer goals in that period. And while, as always with Potter, XG was a little kinder, suggesting they should have had a +2 goal difference instead of their -1, that still would have ranked them as just the 8th best team in the Prem during that run, a level which you'd hope would be the worst a club of that size would hit during the season, not an uptick after even worse performances. Personally, I don't know that I'd have sacked Potter, given that European football is not going to happen, and Bowley didn't have a successor lined up, instead handing the reins to a man who was comfortably outperformed by the next coach in his last 2 jobs. And maybe the last 10 games would have seen something click and Potter balls start to roll. But frankly, I doubt it. The squad is a mess, morale is in the gutter, and short of a big statement performance, the players would have known their boss was on borrowed time, which is hardly a recipe for 100% effort. Would things have been as bad as they look under Lampard? Maybe not. Would they have been acceptable? There's no evidence to suggest the answer is yes. Now, I still rate Potter highly, and I think he will end up with a top job at some stage, after a little more seasoning in the mid-table, but to imagine he could turn it around at Chelsea, I was being blind or desperately optimistic. So that's our roundup of some of our earliest shouts on why you're wrong, but what do you agree with our assessments? Perhaps you think Chelsea will get relegated and prove my Potter takes somewhat right. We can all dream. Remember to post your ideas for future episodes in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.